Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Pedal Shift Project. The Pedal Shift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/274, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or text me at 202-930-1109 and check Pedal Shift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 274th edition of the Pedal Shift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thank you so much for joining on this edition. I cannot tell you how excited I am to preview the Tampa to Disney World 2022 tour. This is very exciting for me for a few reasons. One, it is checking a few boxes that I didn't think would ever be checkable. And number two, I'm just ready to get on the bike again. We're a year off from a pause of winter bike touring. Of course, last year was, the teeth of COVID, and there was no way to be able to pull it off safely. I wanted to, but it just wasn't going to be a responsible thing to do. Now, I'm feeling pretty grateful because I do think that the numbers have come down quite a bit. And I feel like it's responsible and safe to be able to do a tour of this nature, where I'm going, how I'm doing it. I've talked about before, I'm vaccinated, boosted, et cetera, and I do think that that makes a big difference for my own personal kind of a sense of safety and all that other kind of good stuff. And it does feel like, this is not over. It's never going to be over. But I do think that we might be in the place that we thought we were last spring, that it's like, okay, we can mitigate all of the things that we need to mitigate. And there are certainly some folks who are more vulnerable than others. And we're going to have to figure out our best ways to handle all of that. But all of those things added all up, I do think that it is a safe time for me to consider a bike tour in winter and hop on planes and to do all of those things that one needs to do for bike tours of this type. So I'm truly excited for all of that, and I've got some interesting plans, as I've talked about over the last several weeks, for potential tours down the line. I'm adding some complexity to this particular version of the Florida tour, and I'm doing some exploration of cycling in and within and around Walt Disney World property in a very calculated and safe fashion. And I'm going to go into some detail about all of that. I believe I have said on prior podcasts that it is an inherently unsafe to bicycle. Well, new data came along, so we'll get into that. So let's jump in and talk about the basics of this particular version of the winter tour, which is now kind of the third time that I've cycled Central Florida. It's going to be from the Tampa International Airport to Walt Disney World, and that is all by design. The cool thing about the beginning of this trip, the day one, is that I'm flying in at the crack of dawn, and I am going to be flying with my Brompton and just, a few things. There's not going to be any camping here. I'll be able to take the little train kind of thing to the airport's car rental area and then cycle away specifically from the airport. And that's something that I was really loving, how I was able to bike right up to the Medford airport last year. I want to try to do that as much as possible with any and all of my tours that involve airline travel or train travel, to be able to just cycle right up to the transit that I end up doing. I'm going to try to do that as much as feasible. And that's certainly happening here with at least this end of the trip. I'll be able to cycle directly away from the Tampa International Airport. As I mentioned, I'll be on the Brompton. This is going to be 3 days of riding. It's going to be two kind of classic touring days where it's like I'm putting real miles in. And then the third day is the one that's frankly kind of the most interesting to me in some ways because it's new. And that's going to be the cycling around Walt Disney World property and within it as well. We'll get to that in a second. all roofed lodging, so I'm not going to be camping at all. It just makes things a little bit easier. This is along the I-4 corridor where this is happening. There may be camping opportunities in places, probably more stealth camping opportunities. But frankly, when you go from having some camping to no camping to some camping, you end up having to bring a whole lot more stuff, and this makes it a lot easier for me. And frankly, I'm just not kind of in a camping mindset at this point. I am looking forward to doing it, of course, later in the year. This is going to be a real minimal gear kind of trip. I'm going to be bringing minimal clothing with me, stuff that I can rewear, a lot of my merino wool layers, just the kind of stuff that just makes life a little bit easier for me for these days that I'm going to be going. One thing in particular that is going to be included in the new things that I'm trying for this trip, I hope, is I've got, coming from Hong Kong, what could possibly go wrong with supply chain issues and shipping, right? A new form-fitting cover for the Brompton. It's an elasticy kind of cover that's much more form-fitting. The one thing about the Brompton's cover, the stealth cover, is that it is really loose-fitting, and I just have trouble with it. It catches on the wheels when I'm rolling it around in the airports. It's just a bit of a pain. This is really nice and form-fitting and tight. I think it'll also make the bike look smaller, which would reduce the possibility of anybody, gate check agents or whomever, say, that's too big to fit into the overhead. Now, we all know that it fits in the overhead, but I have measured it recently, and Bromptons technically do not fit the dimensions that are required for overhead baggage on most airlines. So it is entirely possible that a flight attendant, a gate agent, someone could just say, look, put it in that thing over there, and it won't fit. So I'm always waiting for the possibility that could happen. But I'm hoping with the stealth mode situation that I'll be able to be better. I don't know if it's going to get here on time. And the challenge that I have is my older cover is sitting back in DC right now. In the midst of the construction that we've got going on. Kimberly is having the place, new kitchen, new bathroom done, so we've been living out here at the cabin. I have a few things that I really kind of need that I forgot to bring in all of the kind of last minute kind of, hey, let's pull all the stuff to the cabin. So I'm really hoping that this cover gets here in the next few days, quite frankly, because if it doesn't, I'm going to have to go digging through a pretty demoed place in DC to be able to find the actual cover, because I do need one. Let's talk about the rough itinerary here. Day one, flying from DC. Actually, let me talk about day 0. As I mentioned, we're out here at the cabin for the next, another month at least. So I'm going to be going the day before. I am going to be sleeping in DC. I may do the micro camper setup of the Buick LaCrosse. That would be actually kind of a fun little addition to the day. A lot will depend on what the temperatures are that night before. But we'll see about that. I could also just bring my kind of camping gear, go to the house and kind of sleep amongst the destroyed demoed parts of the house. I will be there well after any crews would be there, and I will be departing well before anybody comes in, because if they're coming at 4:30 in the morning, they are working too hard. They should not be coming that early. That's when I'm going to have to leave, because I do have a very early flight the next morning. That is the beginning of day 1. I will not ride to DCA. It's just going to be too cold at that hour. And while I conceivably could, it's also going to be so early. And I have a nearly 50-mile day on day 1, 45 if memory serves, because I've just done, as I'll mention in a moment, a bit of a rejiggering of the route. So I will get on the plane, fly there directly, hop off the plane. I mentioned this before. I'll take the little sky train or whatever the heck they call it at the airport in Tampa and go to the end of the line, which is the car rental area, get down, get everything kind of rejiggered. I will be checking one bag just in case, because I'm going to be bringing some tools that I think would qualify as sharps, and also, if I have any liquids. Also, just for the return trip, just in case if I need to check anything. I think it'll be good to have my duffel Speaking of, I need to pick that up back in DC. I hope I can find all these things, by the way. So get rejiggered, get the bike fixed up and loaded up. It should only take a few minutes because of the relatively simple setup that I'm going to have. And then I'm going to ride to Lakeland, Florida. You may remember Lakeland from a couple of years ago. 2019. So 3 years ago, the first time I did it. That is almost exactly midway between the Orlando area and Tampa. It's a great place to lay your head for the night for this type of a trip. I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get into the details. Day 2, casual start. I don't have a huge rush. I do have a longer day on day 2 that's going to be about 48 miles. I will be riding to the Walt Disney World Resort, and like I said, I've got a route, so we'll talk about that in a moment. Day 3, as I mentioned, ride from the resort that I'm going to be staying at, and there is a good route that I can kind of back out of and go up and around to other parts of the Walt Disney World property, some more interesting parts in some ways, and I think I should be able to get onto some multiple resort cycling paths, and I'll talk about those when I talk more specifically about the routing for day 3. So that'll be probably about 25 to 30 miles total. So total for the entire trip will be somewhere between maybe 110 to 120, give or take. A lot will depend on what the third day offers me, because I think there are some question marks in there. And also, timing and all sorts of things. I'll talk about the details when we get to that. Let's talk about the route, because I think that the route is interesting and not interesting at the same time. Day 1, as I mentioned, is riding directly from the Tampa airport. Now, in 2019, when I landed in Tampa, I didn't believe, and that may have been true at the time, because I think that they have added some infrastructure for cycling in that area of Tampa that is now very usable from the airport. I got a ride share. I got a Lyft, an expensive one as memory serves, that dropped me off at kind of a nearby park. And the reason why I did that is that it was right on Hillsborough Bay, and I wanted to kind of, dip the tire in, or I'm not even sure if I did that. I think I just had the bike near it and had a picture. I did videos, by the way, of the 2019 ride, which I'd invite you to check out over on YouTube. I considered a slightly northern route compared to my 2019 ride, just by the nature of the fact that I was starting from the airport. But then I reconsidered. I took a look at it, and it was a lot of very busy roads, but with a bike lane, Highway 92 in particular. And I was like, I don't love this. It's a lot of kind of Central Florida strip mall kind of area riding, and I just wasn't loving that. And I really loved what downtown Tampa looked like. And so I did some rejiggering and took a look at Google Street View and some Ride with GPS data, including the heat map data. And I decided that, for a couple of extra miles of riding, just slightly over 2, I went back down through the downtown area. There's much better infrastructure down there. You get to go by some of the waterfront trail and all of that, go by Tampa Bay Lightning's arena and the convention center and stuff like that. Not that that's super exciting. So, but it's pretty down that direction, and so I thought I would redo all of that. So that's really good. Then I rejoined the 2019 route relatively quickly from there. In fact, that was the 2019 route, quite frankly, until I get through. Let's see, where is that town? I end up in Lakeland for lack of. I may as well not go into all the details there, but it is that same route, and you end up in Lakeland. From that point, I do deviate because I'm staying in a different place this time in Lakeland compared to where I was before. And I'm glad I chose this for a couple of reasons. Number one, last time it was an Airbnb host, and this time it's a hotel. And it turns out that unlike the last time where the Airbnb value was much higher than the hotel value, now it's flipped. I could get a hotel for way cheaper than I could for an Airbnb in the area. And I think that ended up working out well. Also, and I'm glad that it worked out this way, originally my Airbnb was kind of right in the middle of Lakeland, and now I'm going to be staying further away. I'm going to be going mostly through Lakeland, where I'm going to be having the hotel. And for lack of a better way of putting it, on the other side of Lakeland. that was good because as it turned out, when I made the rejiggering for day 2, that ended up adding a bunch of miles. So I'm glad that it kind of evens things out. So day 1 is going to be roughly about 45 miles, and that'll be really good. So there are a couple of restaurants near the hotel that I think that'll all be good. Not going through the downtown area of Lakeland, which is a shame because it's pretty and nice, and there was a good kind of weird dinery thing there. But I think that what I'd like to do is just get all the way there, and if I have to eat at a Cracker Barrel, so be it. Maybe I'll get a pizza or something at the end of the day, but I'm sure I'll be ready for a good night's sleep because I'm sure that the very early wake up call that day is not going to be great. And then doing roughly 50 miles, 45 miles, I'll be pretty tired at the end of that. Day 2. Let's talk about day 2 because this is where things changed. Originally, day 2 was going to end after Dean Still Road, and you can take a look at the route if you'd like from 2019. I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. That was the really key connector that I learned about back in 2019 from the local bike touring clubs or local riding clubs. Dean Still Road is a fast road. I think that the speed limit in parts is 50 miles per hour. However, the good news is it's straight shot and the sight lines are very good, and everybody that drove on that road I think was expecting cyclists. I had a great experience on Dean Still Road both in 2019 and in 2020 when I was coming the opposite direction. It worked out really, really great. It was going to, I shouldn't say, it does spit you out just south and to the west of Disney property. And the reason why I was going to stop there is because many, if not most of the Disney roads on Disney property are shoulderless and they're very high speed. And frankly, they're just not safe to ride. They're the ones that I'm used to seeing when I'm taking transportation into Disney property from the Orlando Hotel or just driving around. You see it. It just I thought all the roads were like that. The original plan was that I would get a ride in, and one of the reasons why I'm taking the Brompton was so that I could fold it up and throw it in the trunk of a Lyft or an Uber and then end up coming in. And then I would do day 3 riding on resort paths, but was finding a real challenge of information on whether I could bring the Brompton folded up on Disney transportation between resorts, which was kind of what I was hoping to do. But there is a ban on bringing luggage, not strollers, but luggage. So, the question would be whether or not it would be considered more akin to a stroller and therefore I could bring it on board, or more like luggage in which I couldn't. And I'm leaning no on it. It looks like that it would be up to each individual cast member driver on the buses, and that's kind of a drag. So, would stealth mode make it pass more as a stroller, even though I clearly didn't have a child with me? I don't know. Then the question ends up being, okay, well, great. Then I'll just do Ubers and Lyfts and, go in between the resorts that way. Well, if you don't have a dining reservation at some of the resorts, they won't let you in. But many of the resorts let you rent bikes. And so the question would be, would I be able to get in? I was asking, on Reddit, I was asking on all sorts of different places. It just wasn't clear. And a lot of people were just sort of like, I don't know, which is unusual because there's a lot of know-it-alls in the Disney World space. So I was pretty stuck, and I really was going to be like, okay, well, I may be in a no man's land, for lack of a better way of putting it, because I could be getting to the resort, which, I have a reservation to go to the resort that I'd have, but I may have a bike with me that I couldn't take on Disney transportation, which would get me into all of these places. So I could get to places, but not have my bike. Or I could have my bike and not be able to get into places without dining reservations, which ends up being a real pain where I have to have lunch reservations to be able to go bike someplace. That wasn't ideal for me. So like I said, I was pretty stuck. Then just as I was kind of like going, what am I going to do? Am I going to have to call resorts? I got an email that got me rethinking things. So big shout out to listener in Central Floridian Dale P, who sent me an email about the roads to ride in the area, but also alerting me to a brand new video that was put up on YouTube by Alex Regino about, ta-da, cycling on Disney property. I've got a link in the show notes to the video. Now, the video itself was more descriptive than informational, but I was able to figure it out along with Dale's help, the route that they were talking about. Now, that wasn't going to help me answer the questions that I had, but it opened up some doors because it turns out there are some newish roads on Walt Disney World property, and some of them and a few others that I didn't know about that were existing ones are far less traveled ones. They're not take your life in your hands riding. Some of them even have really well-defined shoulders, like bike lane style shoulders, which is fantastic. It seems like cycling into at least one of the resort properties is not barred at all, based on the video that we saw. They literally ended up at the Port Orleans Resort, which actually I still can't quite figure out. They had to actually go get in there, go up to security and say, hey, we'd just like to get coffee here on their bikes. And they got let in. So that was actually an interesting piece of data there, but it does go back to the point where it seems like that you could probably be turned away by a cast member or not. So we'll get to that in a moment. I spent a lot of time with this new information, with the video that they shot, with Dale's help on Google Maps Street View, my kind of tried and true. And it turns out the absolutely stunning thing that I figured out was I can safely ride to the resort that I'm staying at on day 2. No question. There is at least one point where it's a little bit weird going underneath one of the major roads that actually I would never consider biking on. But it's an underpass and it works out pretty well. And most of the ride in that area either has a very well-defined shoulder, which I feel perfectly safe cycling in, or there is a well-defined sidewalk that is actually listed on Google Maps as a bikeable route. And I confirmed all of this on Google Maps Street View, and I am super excited to make an attempt on this. Now, I'm going to document this all for you for sure, and I'll talk a little bit more about how I intend to document this portion of the ride in a little bit, but I'm very excited to do it. I also know that I can very easily, if I get to a place, and I've identified a couple places where the shoulder situation is not great. It's for very short periods of time, and it's near on-ramps and off-ramps to busier roads. There are no crosswalks in those areas, so that's going to be the part where it's going to be I'm either going to do this or I'm going to turn around and get an Uber or a Lyft. I'm not going to do something that is just unreasonably dangerous. I'm only going to do this if this works out. I have no problem declaring, you know what? Nope, there's just no good connection here and it's not possible, and go back to the original plan. However, I do think that this is going to be possible. I've really scoped it out pretty well, and I'm excited to give it a try. And as I mentioned, I will document it. Okay, so assuming all of this works out, which it will. Day 2 ends at Walt Disney World, and then, I'm going to enjoy my time at the resorts in the evening there. I've already got some plans that I will be doing that will be off bike. The bike will be folded up in my room, and perfectly safe and happy. Of course, I've kept a folded bike in Disney resorts before. What I haven't done is cycle Disney resorts at all. I did it way, way, way back in the day. In the 1990s, the dream of the 90s, sidebar, I was renting a bike in the Fort Wilderness area and passed by Nancy Kerrigan. Yes, the YYY person who had just recently signed with Disney, and this was before a big controversial video was taken of her complaining while she was on the Disney parade that she was in, and she caught a lot of heat for it. And anyway, she was doing a photo shoot, and I rode right past her. She was on a horse, if memory serves, and I was on a bike. Anyways, sidebar to all of that. That was the last time I cycled on Disney property, and it was with a rented bike, and really only for a short period of time. I would like to do a lot more. So Day 3, the fun one. Going back to the tips that we got from Dale and from Alex, I'm going to backtrack out of the resort the same way that I came in. And then I'm going to go up and around Disney property on a very relatively low trafficked road that gets me to the northern side of Disney World's property and re-enter using the route suggested by Alex, which he documents in that video. You can take a look at it if you'd like. Again, I got the link in the show notes. From there, I'm going to do about 25 to 30 miles of riding through some of the bike-specific paths available, and I'll focus mostly on Wilderness Lodge and Fort Wilderness. And one of the tricks that I'm going to do there is it does appear that it's a very bikeable route. Of course, I've seen people do it on video, so I'm going to give it a shot too. I do have to go up to a security point for going into the Fort Wilderness Lodge, but I have made late breakfast reservations for that day. So, assuming that security wearing mouse ears and coming up and batoning me for daring to ride on Disney roads, which clearly people have done, I don't think it's going to be a problem. If the cast member security guard there was inclined to say, no, you can't come in, I'll be like, yo, breakfast reservations, and then I ride right into Fort Wilderness. Wilderness Lodge. Once I am there, fold up the bike, come on in, enjoy a late breakfast, do my thing there. Then there are connecting trails from Wilderness Lodge all the way to Fort Wilderness, which is the big campground for Disney, and just miles and miles of trails. So I'm going to cycle around and do some fun stuff there. I also have figured out ways to get to some other places, potentially Old Key West, Saratoga Springs. These are all Disney resorts, and a few others. And the reason why I'm looking at those is because there are also bicycle rentals at all of these resorts. If I can safely connect to them, which it looks like some back and side roads within Disney property allow for that, I'm going to be able to put in a nice amount of cycling that day without having to rely on either Disney transportation, which question mark, because I don't know if I can bring my bike, or having to take an Uber or a Lyft, which question mark, I don't know if I can get in if it's not the resort I'm staying at, or if I don't have some kind of a meal reservation there. So my hope is to lay down a route for anyone who wants to bring a bike to Walt Disney World and wants to do some riding along with a real assessment of the safety. I feel like that the video that Alex did was an excellent one for that. I just want to add to the data out there. I'm definitely not the first person to do this, but I want to be able to add to that data point. From that point, I'm going to end up back at the resort, whether I will be able to cycle back or whether I will just tap out from wherever I end up and get an Uber or a Lyft is an open question. The good news about that is, since I'm a resort guest at my resort, I know that I'll be able to get in because I'll be able to flash my key card or my magic band or whatever the heck I'm going to be using for that. If all of this Disney talk is mumbo jumbo, it's okay. The information you will be getting will be all bike centric. That night I'm going to be celebrating by doing something fun. I've done a dry January and up to that point dry February. I will be breaking that by doing a little drinking around the monorail resorts, which includes the Polynesian, the Contemporary, and a few others. If you're not into Disney at all, these are fun places for me. I will not have the bicycle. I will have, however, I will have earlier that day cycled by at least a couple of them, the Polynesian, actually I might be going the other way. Anyways, I'll have been bicycling in that general area thanks to Alex's information. All right. So that was a very lengthy description of what's going to be a fun 3 days. The next day, I will be checking out of the hotel. I can check the bike and the bags. I don't love checking the bike, but the services that they have at the hotels, I know that they'll keep it safe. And they've done it before. I've done it before. So I do feel safe with all of that. And then I'll be kind of doing some other things. I've got an evening flight, and I will be taking some form of transportation. I will not be bicycling from the Disney Resort to the airport. Orlando Airport is not great for cycling in or out of. It's very busy, mostly highways that serve it. It's not an urban airport. It's out on the north and I believe east side of town. Not super easy to get to by bicycle. I'm sure it's doable. But I think that I will have had quite a fill over the last few days, and I think I would rather take four-wheel transportation or multi-wheel transportation if I end up with a bus. So that will conclude the trip. I'll fly back to DC late and be coming back out to the cabin very late, and that will probably not feel so good. Another reason why I don't think I'm going to ride that day, because I do have to get back to the cabin that night. Let's talk weather conditions. It could be very hot. Within the last few days, last week or two, it's been in the upper 80s in Central Florida. Yeah, it's super hot. It could be very cold. It's been in the 50s, the low 50s in the last week or two, within the last week or two. And I'm talking daytime temperatures. However, it does look like as we get closer, and I'm looking at the weather forecasts that are kind of on the bleeding edge of for entertainment purposes only, those kind of longer term ones, it looks like it's going to be dry and seasonably temperate, which means that there's going to be a low chance of rain and highs in the upper 70s or maybe in the very low 80s. The mornings will start out in the probably mid to upper 50s. I just think that's perfect riding conditions for me. Most importantly, it does appear that it's going to be overcast skies. I know all of you who are going to be traveling to Central Florida during the time that I'm there will be very upset at that. I am going to be very excited because I would much prefer to cycle in cloudy conditions than in sunny conditions. So wahoo to that. I'll make sure I dial in the right gear based on these weather forecasts as I get within more into a couple of days. We're just entering the realistic type of forecasts as I'm sitting here recording this. It seems like this will match well or be similar at least to my two previous rides in 2019 and 2020. Both of those were about 3 to 4 weeks earlier than when I'm going now. I encountered really excellent conditions then. I had a little bit of drizzle in the 2020 ride, which was that kind of hysterical ride where I was riding with a lightsaber attached to the back of the Brompton. It was kind of funny, but it wasn't that bad. The little bit of drizzle, I don't mind a little bit of drizzle. So I'm thinking that it's going to be good weather. I will be prepared for some cooler temperatures for the beginning and at least the possibility of some rain. So I will bring at least the rain jacket. Whether I'll bring the rain pants, I think I'll just wait until we're much closer and we know a little bit more about all of that. Layers, probably, my merino wool, I'll have, base layers and some warmer layers as well so that I can kind of get in and out. The good news is that those are the same types of things that I can wear, while bopping around the resorts and whatnot. So minimal amounts of clothing that I'll have to bring, which is fantastic. Let's talk about documenting the ride. Obviously, I'm going to be recording it for the show. So join us all through March, and you'll get an episode that will include the days 1, 2, and 3, and then probably a takeaways episode where I can talk a little bit more after the fact about my assessment of the ride and the route and all of that. I may try to do some video for this, and I think that where I would be focusing on that would be for the Disney part of the ride. I think that it's really important that if I'm going to be talking about riding in and around Disney, that I get some visuals for folks, because there are definitely roads that I'm willing to ride on and conditions that I'm willing to ride on that many of you who would consider doing the same here would not. And I really want to make sure that I get visuals there. I think that's really, really important. So if that does happen, I will be putting those up on YouTube at some point in the month of March, I believe. I don't want to commit to particularly when, because it just depends on how it goes, whether I actually do it or not, and what it all looks like and how I can piece it all together. So TBD on all of that. I also will be able to assess what resorts are the best ones to consider if you want to go to Walt Disney World and ride your bike and be able to ride to it, have it be a piece of a tour of your own, or just if you are going to go with friends or family or something like that and you want to do a cycling day. So I'm hoping to be able to give that kind of information as well, both on the podcast here and also potentially on YouTube as well. So that's how we're going to be documenting things. Oh, and of course, I'll probably be taking a fair amount of pictures. Whether they will be in real time on Instagram or not, open question. I may do them as little later grams just because it makes my life a little bit easier in terms of how we document things. So more to come on all of that, and you all will, of course, be the first to know. Wrap up. I'm excited. Can you tell? I'm super excited for this ride. I'm excited to share this with you. I'm particularly intrigued with the unusual nature of the Disney World elements of it, both just ending my day 2 and the internal riding within Disney property, if I can pull all of that off. This is not a route that is done very often. It's absolute happenstance that Alex put out that video within a reasonable amount of time of me doing this ride. I've seen one other video of someone riding in and around Disney World. If you go on Reddit and you go on boards, most people say absolutely do not do this. And I think they're right for certain of the roads, the main roads. But it does appear that there are opportunities that are safe and interesting and fun that you can do. I have to assume someone has done a bike tour where they've done what I'm about to do, which is to be able to cycle to their resort in Walt Disney World. And it's maybe part of a longer tour or whatever. But there's nothing I can dig up on that. I did something close to that, but I stayed off property in Kissimmee the one time that I did it back in 2020. So I think that this may be the first, but I'm going to assume it's not, and it just wasn't documented. Disney property for day 3 is also full of really interesting flora and fauna. So I think that just the wildlife and the fun that I may have that I'm not even thinking about on the 3rd day is going to be really interesting. And I can't wait for all of that, because I think there's going to be some fun surprises with all of that there. So I think it's going to be a unique and interesting way to wrap up the tour. And hopefully I can provide some knowledge for folks who are interested in this kind of thing. If you are not interested in Disney World, don't worry. This is still going to be much more focused on bike touring than anything else. So if Disney is not your thing, I think that this is still going to be a compelling type of ride just for the interesting challenges that will be part of it, particularly at the end of day 2. And the sort of, am I really allowed to be here day 3? It's kind of analogous to stealth camping in some ways, I think. So I think it'll be fun. And I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. I'm leaving within a few days of me recording all of this, and I'll be able to share this with you throughout the month of March. So come along for the ride, why don't you? And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedal Shift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedal Shift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows and covering new tours like this fall's upcoming bike tour. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one-shot and annual options if you're not into the small monthly thing. Check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lane, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittus, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadas, Chris Barron, Mark Van Rand, Brad Hipwell, Mr. T, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joaquin Robber, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Henkel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Jody Zaranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Bigel, Greg Middlemiss, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latoile Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Ronald Paroli, Dave Roll, Ryan Hafner, Misha Lebon, Ari Messenger, David Gropke, Todd Grossbeck, Wally Estrella, Sue Reinert, John Lico,
Stephen Granada, Philip Mueller, Robert Lackey, Dominic Carroll, Jackie McCullough, John Hickman, Carl Presseau, David Neves, Patty Louise, Terry Fitzgerald, Peter Steinmetz, Timothy Fitzpatrick, Michael Azuski, Hank O'Donnell, David Zanoni, David Weil, Matthew Sponseller, Chad Reno, Spartan Dale, Carolyn Ferguson, Peggy Littlefield, Lauren Allensmith, Eric Burns, Thomas Pearl, Darren McKibben, Richard Stewart, Dave Fletcher, Jack Smith, Luke Parkinson, and new to the society, Ryan Patterson. And thanks also to all past and anonymous folks for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedal Shift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedal Shift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.